Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the afternoon session of the 2020 Inclusion Summit, Rising to the Equity Challenge. And I hope for some of us who were in the morning sessions, what a fabulous morning we had. So we're excited to kick off the afternoon sessions, and we know you're going to get some great information and great sharing happening this afternoon also. My name is Elizabeth Buck, and I'm the president of the United Way of Central Iowa.
Hello, my name is Joshua V. Barr, and I am the director of the Des Moines Civil and Human Rights Commission and co-chair of the 21-Day Challenge.
This afternoon, Joshua and I would like to share a few insights from the 21-Day Equity Challenge that was completed here in Central Iowa on November 2nd. We will then turn it over to our friend Shekinah Young and an aspiring group of young leaders for a panel discussion about how our young leaders can impact equity and inclusion in our community. Finally, from 2:30 to 3:30 and from 3:30 to 4:30, you're invited to join breakout sessions for even more in-depth discussions about 5 key areas: education, housing, wealth, justice, and health. So Joshua, as co-chair of the 21-Day Equity Challenge, I would first like to ask you to share how the challenge worked and how Central Iowans responded to the initiative.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. I was honored to serve as co-chair along with you in this challenge, and more than happy to share a little bit about how it worked. So the United Way wanted to try a challenge here in Central Iowa, a challenge on equity, and Elizabeth reached out to me and an incredible group of leaders across our community to form a steering committee made up of 29 experts from different fields throughout our community. Each of them with a wealth of knowledge about Central Iowa and some of the challenges we face in regards to inclusion and equity. Our first challenge was to put together a collection of topics and content that will be meaningful, educational, compelling, relevant, but also entertaining to Central Iowans here in Iowa. And our second challenge was to share this opportunity with the community and enlist as many Central Iowans as possible to participate in order to expand their knowledge on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
That's right, Joshua. Hopefully many of you were able to join us this morning for our keynote presentation from Dr. Eddie Moore, Jr. We first reached out to Dr. Moore because he had invented the 21-Day Equity Challenge concept. And we love the ideas as a powerful way to share a lot of information, important information from some incredible people and to spread really the knowledge throughout our community. And Dr. Moore chose that 21-day time frame because he knew that it takes that long to form a habit. And this morning he actually said that he thinks it really takes 60 days. So maybe we'll have to think about a 60-day challenge. I don't know, that seems a little daunting, but and that if people formed a habit of educating themselves about issues of equity and inclusion, it could lead to a lifetime of learning, growing, and action to address these important issues.
And, you know, Liz, that is very important about the lifetime of growing. So once we decided to move forward, the committee started by contacting as many organizations as we could to sign on as supporters of this initiative in our community. From businesses and nonprofits to churches to neighborhood associations, we enlisted their help in spreading the word and helping us to add on people who would be willing to take on this challenge to grow and learn as people. We asked them to share it with their employees, their customers, their constituents, members, and people that were key to their success, such as other stakeholders. We set an initial goal of about 200 people, 200 organizations to support the cause, but actually we ended up with 573 supporting organizations. And with the help of this amazing group of committed allies, we set our goal for the number of participants very high at about 10,000. And the question initially was, could we actually meet that? But as I stated earlier, we've surpassed our goals in leaps and bounds, and we officially had 26,642 participants who signed up. We are aware that thousands more received our daily emails as various organizations forwarded it to companies, persons, employees in their company. So And we also probably had people who also read it on the website and just started there and started later initially. So our best estimate is that we had more than 30,000 participants by the end of our challenge on November 2nd. And that didn't just include people in Iowa, but I received emails from people in Minnesota and Kansas as well. So we expanded our reach.
Yeah, it was exciting, amazing. We were really glad to see that our community joined together like they did, and that I think we never expected that we would reach this kind of numbers. But Joshua, as you and I know, there was a little bit of pushback. It was really brave for all of us to come together and to lead this work, because there were some organizations that really were not ready for this work yet and decided not to join our group. Any thoughts about that, Joshua?
Well, I think on this train towards progress and inclusion, everybody's not going to jump on at the same time. Some people are going to be in the caboose. And so we're willing to lead this train and have this discussion, even despite some pushback and some doubt. Understanding that there are some people who are going to charge forward and hear the call immediately, and other people it takes a little longer to get on board. But I think as long as we keep moving with inclusion and justice for all, eventually people will jump on and say, you know what, I don't want to get left behind. So we consider ourselves early adopters, but there's a lot more that can be done.
Right, and just to talk briefly about how we really got to the topics. The steering committee really came together to choose the daily topics, and we broke into small groups and began really selecting articles, podcasts, TED Talks, and so much more. Hopefully you saw that every day we had 4 to 5 options that you could choose from, and it was really an amazing effort. We also were proud that we were able to partner with Bravo to put together such a great teamwork on this effort. If you're interested in going back and looking at the work, you can go to equitychallenge.org. The resources will be there as a library for folks to use going forward.
So selfish plug, you'll find some stuff from our office there as well. We have our documentary, Breaking Bread, Building Bridges, which just won an Emmy, as well as some other important information that many persons contributed to in their local organizations and the work that they're doing. And we were just amazed at how committed all the participants were to complete the challenge. And I think we have fantastic open rates and click rates on the daily emails. And I know United Way received a number of feedback. I teach a class, and I had students who participated and gave me some feedback as they went through the process. The feedback we received from, it was overwhelmingly positive. And again, you can always go back to the website, and we provided additional resources, especially in day 21, like a group discussion guide and daily journal pages. So you can highlight your journey through this process. And the thing everyone needs to understand is this is a journey. You'll never completely reach the destination. But in life, you should be constantly evolving and constantly growing. And if you're not growing, you're dying. And I want everybody, especially in this field of work, to understand that we have so much more work to do, regardless of who's in office. We still have a lot more work to do. So download the tools and use them to enhance your learning experience.
And as I mentioned before, we were really excited to partner with our good friends at Bravo to incorporate a cultural element. Every day at the bottom of the email, there was a relevant piece of art that expanded on the concept of that day. The Bravo members curated, a diverse array of art, from paintings and sculptures to dance and musical performances, film, poetry, and spoken word, and so much more. Their contribution to the project really helped to add an important element to the learning we all experienced, and we're very grateful for them and that commitment.
So we know that there are many people on this Zoom meeting today, this Zoom conference, the inclusion panel, who also participated in the challenge. And we actually hope that you took the time to fill out the post-survey challenge, because we want to know how you grew and what you'd like to see moving forward, because the challenge of inclusion and equity doesn't end after 21 days. Building the habit, Dr. Moore alluded to this morning, much longer than 21 days. And the difficult thing about a challenge or habit is once you stop doing it, you got to start over. Well, not necessarily start over, but you lose something. And again, this is a train that's ever moving. so many of you have asked if we plan to do the challenge again or if we have plans for next steps. We're in the process of planning next steps now, and that content is still going to be on the website for anyone to access anytime they want. Please visit, as Liz said, www.equitychallenge.org. Scroll through the daily calendar, download stuff, click through, save it on your YouTube page. And if you weren't able to get through everything, you can still do it. The challenge doesn't end after the 21 days. It's all about you, and you can continue with it.
Joshua, I just want to take a minute to thank you for joining and being the co-chair of this. Little did I know, and did you know how much work would go into it, and you really were dedicated to making sure this project was well done. So I appreciate everything you did, and a special thanks to the 29 members of our steering committee. Without your efforts, this would not have been possible.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed working with you.
So I'd like to take a moment now to introduce our good friend, Shekinah Young, who's going to lead us and our panelists to a Young Equity Leaders panel discussion this afternoon. Thanks, Shekinah.
Thank you, Liz and Joshua, for your work. I appreciate it personally, as well as the efforts that are going to go forward throughout the region. You know, sometimes people despise youth, right? Or maybe not despise in such a negative way, but you think because someone is younger that they haven't had as much life experience. And so sometimes you may not value their input or their opinions. Well, we are in luck, people. We have some dynamic folks on the call with us today that are going to talk to us about their work specifically with equity and inclusion, not just in a general sense, but what they have done and what they are committed to doing to bettering and improving our region and the community that we call home. And so I do not want to steal any of their thunder, and I will allow them to introduce themselves with our intro question that you are tasked with 2 minutes of telling us your name. I got my notes and I'm all off my note topic. Your name, why you work for equity and inclusion, and how. So your name, why you work for equity and inclusion, and how. I believe we have about 3 or 4 panelists. We're going to check on that 4th one, but let's start with you, Sandra.
Thanks for throwing me, sis. Hi, my name is Sandra Nassemiu, and I go to the University of Iowa. I'm a sophomore there. The reason why I do equity and inclusion work is because I have seen the effects of when you don't do it. And I have 4 younger siblings who vary from the age of 1 to 12. And the things that I experienced through elementary school, high school, I want them to be able to be in a space that was better, a better environment than what I had. And I really do believe that education is key, but it should start young because it's harder to teach people at an older age than it is a younger age, especially when it becomes a habit while they're still young. It allows them to better help out in society, better be a part of these conversations, and just know what's going on overall.
Thank you, Sandra. Julian?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julian Neely, and I would say the reason why I get involved in equity and inclusion work is, one, who wouldn't? I think this is the morally correct thing that we should be doing. If we weren't doing this, we would be in the same predicaments that we've been in the past. And it's time for a change, and we need to be able to fully invest as we actively are recruiting more people to get onto this wave and to get onto this train of equity and inclusion. We have to stay in it, you know what I mean? So I think that's the biggest thing. And then 2, I've also experienced discrimination. I've seen it done upon my peers and my family members, and that's something that I don't want them to experience. But then also, as we think about youth, I also do it in regards to them. I don't want Black and brown youth to be able to having to go through these same experiences and these same hardships and experience these similar glass ceilings that we are already experiencing today. So that's why I'm actively involved in it, is because we have to change it. Like, it's been too late. And so we have to actively be engaged to make sure that these things don't continuously occur.
I agree. Robert, I was trying to see if Arthur, we'll go ahead with you, Robert.
Hey everyone, first of all, thank you for coming on here and spending a few minutes of your day to have conversation with us. So my name is Robert Shimway. I go to Georgetown University, studying political economy. Originally from Des Moines, originally from Tanzania, but grew up in Des Moines, Iowa. And I guess my answer to why I'm in this work, I would say the biggest thing is because of my lived experience, and that I don't think many of us, especially Black people, have an option about this work of equity and inclusion. We live and experience discrimination, whether it's on a daily basis, a weekly basis, whether it's at work, at school. It's things we experience, and so we don't have an option because we always have to be sort of on the defensive a lot of times. And I think a lot of us as young people, we're trying to be on the offensive side to say, hey, we're trying to mitigate against these things happening and rooting them out. And so for me, it's about, I don't think I have a choice. I think it's something that I have to do for myself and for my community and for Black people and all people who are marginalized communities who face the sort of discrimination that we face in this country and around the world. And I think for me, it's been mostly about education. You know, when I was still in high school, a lot of my work centered around how to bring about equity and equality within education and trying to change some of the policies around teacher prep programs and sort of what sort of knowledge were teachers coming into school with when teaching students of color. And I think now it's sort of verged into sort of about going into the sort of economic and business realm about how do we start changing that as well. And that's sort of where a lot of my interest is leaning towards of, hey, there's a lot of conversations we have to have about the economic landscape and who is allowed to gain capital and create wealth and who isn't. And so, yeah.
That's good stuff. I told you they were dynamic, right? So let's jump into these questions. First one, what does equity mean to you? Let's go in the same order. Sandra?
So for me, equity is about sustainability and like generational wealth. And generational wealth does not mean money. It means knowledge, because understanding that knowledge is a priceless currency. And when we work for equity and inclusion, I want it to be something that I believe that specifically I always bring up my siblings is that if I'm not there to protect them, that I know that they're going to be okay, that I know that the community that I leave them in, that the people that I left them with are going to be able to take care of them, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally, that they feel safe with these people. So that is exactly why I get involved.
Thank you. Julian?
Yeah, I would agree. It's definitely sustainability. In addition to that, it's also recognizing the harm that has been done historically and the historical systems that have placed us in the situation that we are currently in, especially when it comes to like specifically like Black and brown folks. And then it also, an attachment to that is that once we were able to recognize those things, we were able to dismantle and disassemble those systems to be able to reconstruct different things, to be able to uplift and to alleviate a lot of those different discrimination and different barriers that we are faced with today. Equity also ties to the element, like I said, I think the biggest thing is really just recognizing it. And then once we were able to recognize it, we were able to move forward. I don't think it definitely surpasses equality where like everyone is supplied the same rights and things like that. But there are different elements that are in place that still hinder. And as a lot of people have used this graphic of like they're on that Black woman that is like has the chain around her ankle and she's racing against that white man in that graphic. It proves that systematically, and as Sandra said, like there's generational influences and generational advantages that a lot of people hold that do not hold our racial identity. And so even if you are able to open the door and grant equality to everyone, there's still a difference and there's still a gap between individuals. So there's no true equality. So equity has to be implemented into the system or implemented into the space to be able to make sure that people are on the same line.
Makes a lot of sense. Robert?
Yeah, I took down some notes as well, just as a way to remind myself about the work of equity. And I think for me, in terms of what equity means, for me, it's about being proactive and sort of about bringing about certain social, economic, and political outcomes for the most disenfranchised members of a society as a way to improve all of society. And I think hinting to those two different themes that they were talking about, and I think a lot of times there's been this conversation about, hey, if you can improve the situation of Black America, you will have been able to improve the situation of all of America. And that's the thing. So equity has to be about paying attention to the most disenfranchised members of a society and doing the work to bring about certain outcomes for those people. And by doing that, you will create a ripple effect to bring about progress and positive change for all of society. And so that's the way which I use equity.
Y'all are dropping gems today like it's just nothing. I think it's, I'm so used to being physically in the same space with you. And I'm like, all right, about to throw my pen, and we're doing that differently in the digital world. But I think that makes a lot of sense. All three of you brought up very valid, different pieces of what equity looks like and what that means to you. My next question is about, what do you want others to know, specifically others in the Des Moines region, about the work for equity and inclusion? Sandra?
So I think it's important to know that there's a difference between active learning and passive learning, and also that counts for also involvement. So often people like to give money, and money is always great, but it's also great to get involved. You don't always got to give money. There are great organizations here in Des Moines. I mean, look at all of us right now on the Zoom call. There are ways you can get involved on hand, and it's good to see people, members of the community there in person. Well, not at the moment, clearly with everything that's going on, but being there for people, because I see often that people donate and they donate and they donate, but it's like a passive way so that they can take a seat back and be like, voila, I did my part. I gave y'all some money. What else do you want from me? And it's like, your money does not fix the problem all the way. Like it also is important for you as a human to be there, to take action, to take point, and to take care of your community in more than one way.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and it connects back to what one of the speakers was saying prior to the break about when you get to the table, you don't get a medal for participation. We're behind. There's work to do. So thank you for bringing that to light. Julian?
Yes, I would totally agree with what Sandra had to say. What I want to see within Des Moines community fighting equity, I think the biggest statement you can say is just get involved. As Sandra said, there's definitely a lot of passive ways that people have gotten involved, as she said, with talking about funding, like giving out financial support and things like that, which is important and essential. But I feel like also there's also a very performative approach that our community has taken, from just signing on to certain challenges to signing to by engaging in certain campaigns or engaging in certain marketing strategies of being able to promote that they are supportive of the movement or supportive of people's rights. You have to go beyond that. We need these systems, these political systems, to be disenfranchised. Like they have to be dismantled, and until we are fully involved into that, we're going to see this continuous cycle. And I think that's what we have seen for so long, is that people are only willing to take that first step, and that's all they're willing to do. They're not willing to go to build upon it and take that additional steps, because like one step doesn't doesn't do anything. Like it may give like a 0.0001% impact to what we're actually fighting for. And that's why the progress has been so slow, is because we don't fully contribute the amount of effort that it takes to really dismantle these systems. So getting involved within city council meeting was last night, and a lot of young BLM organizers were on that call, challenging these individuals that are supposedly leading this city, and how a lot of our leaders have some very problematic ideologies and mindsets that are now being fostered into our space and are leading how our community is going forward. So it's really important to get involved with that. And so then also looking at how is the city's budget being allocated to different elements? And then also who's really controlling the city council? And if you really look at it, I'll say speaking with city council people, certain folks have specified that the police unions really control what is going to occur. And so when we were talking about this, these racial bias ordinance and things like that, a lot of times these individuals experience messages from police unions to really enforce what way that they should swing on their vote. And so we really need to dissect and really understand the culture and also the political systems that are tied on how decisions are being made and how we're being led forward, because a lot of them are very, in a way, corrupt and also questionable, because it definitely impacts everybody. And so I think we really have to do a full scope and a full observation and analysis of like, how is our systems constructed, and are there holes in it, and are there certain people that are holding on to the progress that can possibly occur in our city.
Okay, so you're saying get involved beyond just performative measures, take more than just that first step. How can this be sustainable? But also assessing structures and systems that are in place to figure out where those gaps are, where the inequities are, and get to work fixing that. Robert, what do you want others to know about the work for equity in the Des Moines region?
Well, I would say the first thing is that people have to recognize that there is an issue, that there is a problem when it comes to equity, that racism is well and alive in Des Moines, that I've faced it multiple times. And so the first thing is that white people have to recognize that these things are real, and these things are true, and these things happen to people of color, communities of color that, you know, I'm sure Shekinah's, you know, with the report that you all have done about how, you know, sort of the racial sort of inequities within Des Moines, within the city, you know, with it being one of the most segregated city, you know, in the country. When you look at Black home ownership, it's not there like it should be. When you look at Black business ownership, it's not there like it should be. Black wealth, it's an economically uninducive place for a Black person to live, if we're being truthfully honest with ourselves. And so that's the first thing that we have to recognize, that these problems are real and that they do occur. And the second is that, look, Black people are done carrying dead weight with them on this work of trying to bring about equity and racial justice. Either you're on the train with us or you're not. When we say boycott, you're going to boycott or you're not going to boycott. You got to decide where you stand on the fence, right? And I think one of the issues that I think I've seen, especially when I'm thinking through the Black Lives Matter movement, is that there was a lot of things that would happen. A little confrontation happened, and a lot of white people would back away. They would get afraid. Oh, I don't want to be associated with this no more. And what that showed to me was that a lot of the people in Des Moines did not have the capacity to do the sort of introspective work to understand the complexities of the actions that were being taken place, to understand as to why around the country people were looting stores, and how that tied to generations of communities being locked out of economic opportunities and being disenfranchised, whether it's a polling ballot and economic and political sort of institutions. And so that is the one thing, is that before you react, especially if you're not a person of color, make sure you do the proper research to understand as to why people are reacting the way that they're reacting to these things. And then in terms of proactive measures, if we're talking about the city, look, let's look at, you know, some of the work that are being done at Central Campus with sort of welding and teaching people all these different vocational trainings and skills. Okay, let's get a lot of young people to gain those skills. And then guess what we do? There's a lot of homes that need to be fixed up in Des Moines. Why doesn't the city try to do some program where you take those kids and then you get them to fix up those homes and also pay them in the process? See, that I don't know, that's not you don't need a consultant, Bain consultant or BCG to come from Boston or New York to come and help you figure out how to do something like that. That's a proactive measure that the city can take to try to better the sort of living conditions of their Black and community and the different communities and in their city and whatnot. It's things like that. Be proactive about the work. Don't ever be apologetic about this work as well. And so there's a lot of things that we could do that's very proactive, that is not difficult to do. It's about those in power having the will to do it, and those who are adjacent to power sort of applying the proper pressure to get these things done. And so, you know, those are the kind of things that I think we ought to do, especially in the city of Des Moines.
I'm a words person. I got you, Julian. Un momento. I am a words person and I take notes all the time. Y'all are full of quotes, okay? I am writing my quotes down. I appreciate you for all of that. Julian, what's your extra 2 cents you gonna throw on that? Yeah, you're muted.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't unmute myself for a minute. It wouldn't allow me. But Robert, what you said, I'm so glad you spoke about that. It's so important. But also on top of that is that our city, and I'm glad we're talking about specifically Des Moines, is because we see within our own neighborhoods and also our own neighborhood associations or even nonprofits that are established in certain neighborhoods, that they're willing to give up their neighborhood specifically for capitalism and for other businesses to be able to flourish. So they're literally building buildings to be able to bring more profit to specifically white businesses. And so then it literally disregards Black business owners, Black entrepreneurs that are in the city to the opportunity to be able to expand and elevate. And a lot of us, and we all know a whole bunch of Black entrepreneurs probably on this call that are either working outside their home, working outside their apartment, just to be able to operate their own businesses. And the opportunity to really expand our businesses are not being granted to us in our own city. And it really comes from organizations or even governmental structures that advocate for racial justice or social justice that continuously block and create barriers for us to succeed in all different elements. And so I think that was also a point I wanted to add, is that we would look at, like, when it comes to helping folks get home ownership, when it comes to folks getting grants to be able to support their businesses, Black and brown businesses, Black and brown homeowners, or even folks that want to be homeowners are not getting granted those opportunities. We're being left out. And that is also part of what we seek when we talk about equity. So I think that I wanted to add that piece into that conversation as well, because I'm glad Robert opened that door, because yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. I want to underscore that your voices are so important. You are, you hear people saying all the time, the next generation, the next workforce, and all of those things. But when you look back through history, not just the United States of America, but the world, young adults have been at the helm of those changes that have happened, which is why your voices are so important. When you look at China in the late 1980s, there was fighting the Communist Party. Young adults were leading that fight. When you look at what was happening in like Arab countries with overthrowing different forms of power that didn't feel like they were really helping the people, young adults were at the helm of that. Just recently in 2017, when you talk about Dakota Access Pipeline, helping with indigenous water rights, young adults are at the helm of that. And clearly we've seen this summer, but even prior to that, when you talk about civil rights movements, freedom fighters, Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, I want to underscore to you and also our participants with us that this is nothing new, that youth are leading in innovation and change and creating the kinds of community that we want to see. And so understanding that your voices are important, understanding that you being involved in the change, communicating with those that may not have an understanding that you have. What would you say now that you have the ear of the Des Moines community? And I want to be clear, I'm talking about Des Moines, surrounding suburbs, everybody in between. Now that you have the ear of the Des Moines business community, we have lots of different industries that are present here. Robert was talking about economic impact. Julian was talking about political impact. Sandra was talking about what are we leaving to those behind us, or our siblings or others that we care about, what would you say to the business community as you are working for equitable practices, equitable access to capital, jobs, community enrichment? What would you say to them that they can do to be helpful, to be complementary to that work? And don't be afraid to shout out organizations that you have worked alongside that you feel like are helpful in this. Maybe they're not aware of those. Share all your GEM resources. Sandra, we'll start with you.
So I actually have 3 things. I wrote 3 things for this specifically. The first one was, it's not enough to have a token. I am a global health and computer science major, and for global health, we do a lot of research and surveys and things like that. And often, for like example, we would do a project about mothers and maternal health in a specific city or neighborhood, and the people that they had for that they were researching and using for these surveys didn't match with the population that was there. It would have like 1 or 2 people that would be most affected from this research project, but the rest were majority people who were not going to be affected the most. But because they put those 1 or 2 people in that survey, in this project, they believe that somehow that was them getting enough of the data that they needed. It's not enough to have 1 or 2 people as a token to make you feel as if you've included everybody. 2, don't write off concerns that you don't understand. There are things from all these different intersectionalities that you can't be knowledgeable about and you may never fully understand, but you writing off someone else's concerns because it doesn't fit with your ideology is not going to help your business, and it's going to hinder it more than ever. So please be mindful of that, and watch out for microaggressions amongst your workers and the people around you, because working in a space where you hear all these little things left and right, and often your boss will let it slide or you don't think it's a big deal. Honestly, why are you okay and being complicit with you having workers who say things that hurt other people in this space that you believe are important to making sure your business is successful? That makes no sense. Let them go. You need to also be willing that in these businesses, when you are having these conversations, to actually have these conversations. I am blessed and lucky enough that the job that I have now up at the University of Iowa, they have literally made it part of our meetings that we have to discuss things that are relevant and going on globally, regardless of how we feel political, socioeconomically. We will have a full hour discussion about these things where everybody must participate and give their voice and talk about this, even if you are uncomfortable. Because the only way that you will do better if you are uncomfortable is by getting out of your comfort zone. It's going to hurt, but by the end of it, the things that I have seen come out of my own coworkers, of them getting called out, even if their feelings got hurt for a second, they realized they needed to do better. You have to continuously do better. You cannot be okay with something. You have to be willing for the people in this workspace to have these conversations and not worry about how someone else's feelings are going to be about this because they've never had to have this conversation in their life. And I should also note that in these conversations, you will have those 1 or 2 people be like, well, I just don't feel like I have anything to say about this. I just want to sit back and listen. No. Actively say something. Do something in these conversations. But you saying that you just have nothing to say lets me know that you do not care for this conversation because it does not affect you.
They did not come to play today, ladies and gentlemen. Julian, you have the ear of the Des Moines business community area. What would you say to them to help come alongside the work of equity and inclusion to be complementary to some of your efforts? Don't be afraid to shout out some specific organizations or efforts that they can jump on with.
Absolutely. I think first is to recognize your flaws, recognize the hurt that you have possibly done and put into the space to perpetuate a lot of these stereotypes and barriers that we are experiencing. Even as a Black man, there's definitely things that I have participated in my lifetime that I am like not happy about. but it's being able to reflect and to be able to recognize how you have participated in it, recognize that, speak it out, and then change your behaviors and your actions and move forward to be able to join on the train of racial equity. So I think that's the first thing. I don't think businesses are in the space to really fully recognize how they're a part of this problem. And so I think, one, people have to recognize that, speak out, yes, we have a problem, we need to fix it. Second is doing the education and the actual work to really invest into this work. I think when we talk about, so I'll say in general, we have these conversations about how much we're supposed to give to folks when it comes to racial equity and racial enlightenment. It's like you do little pieces, like here's this is something that you'll be able to digest. I think we're past that point. I think we're at a point where, I think, take it as like a graduate course, or just an undergraduate course, where you have to take a required course to graduate and to do the work that you're trying to do, or be in the career that you're trying to do. You are required to be culturally competent. Like, you, in any leadership position, you are required to be culturally competent because the workspace is getting so diverse. And so there is no level of, oh, let me take level 1 first. No, we're past that point. Here's the information, digest it, comprehend it, understand it, and then identify ways you can execute it. That is where we're at. Like, there's no question about it. Sandra said it, Robert said it, everybody has been saying it. Like, we cannot just give little pieces and stuff like that. That takes too much time. We're so past that. And so take that, learn it. Like, I really dislike hearing folks crying like, okay, this is too much, I don't think we're ready for this. No, like, scratch that. You have to do this. If you are not willing to do the work, then you should not be in this position. If you're not willing to invest into this, then you're not meant for this position. If you're not willing to speak up, or if you're not willing to be involved in it, you're not meant for this position. And I think, too, we also have to take racial discrimination, racial bigotry that happens in the workspace, or just in any space, similar to how we treat other violations within the workspace. I think we really put it on a low spectrum of like, oh, that's just a slap on the wrist. No, that should be top tier of accountability. Like, that has to be, because that's people's mental health. And I think, too, we don't recognize the impact of glass ceilings and the mistreatment of Black and brown people within workspaces and how that contributes to mental health within our community. Like, a lot of these spaces like contribute to our unhealthy mental health. So I think that's something, too. And so, in addition to that, I think businesses need to get out of this mindset of like a quota. I'm a product of Iowa State. Iowa State has heard this from me multiple times, especially administration. Get out of this mindset of quota, and as similar to what Sandra said, stop tokenizing us. There's not one Black person that can speak on all of our experiences, all of our backgrounds. There's not. There's absolutely not. And so stop trying to just hire that one, or trying to recruit that one Black person. And also, data doesn't speak about anything. Data does not prove that you're culturally competent. Data doesn't prove that you are about racial equity. It does not. If you are not fully, like, you can hire all you want, you can recruit all you want, Black and brown people, but if you are not changing the culture and the environment of your space, you're not doing the work. You're actually putting Black people that you just hired into harm's way.
I think it's really cool to hear some of your answers. Sorry, Julian, but I think it's really cool to hear some of your answers because they're very complimentary to what we've heard earlier from some of the speakers. I don't know if you all had an opportunity when Rosalind Fox was saying, what isn't measured doesn't get done. So when you're talking about the way that we measure these things, and it's beyond the data and it's beyond just bringing the people in. Another speaker talked about the environment that you're bringing people into. So that speaks to Julian's point about mental health. I love the complementary pieces of this, and just to see how it's working in our community, even with the younger adults and then the more seasoned folks that have been fighting the fight for some time. Did you want to finish up what you were saying? Sorry, Julian, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, you're fine. I appreciate that. One last thing is remove the glass ceilings that you have over Black folks in your office, specifically Black women. There are multiple Black women, even on this call, that are experiencing glass ceilings because you don't see potential or value within them. Break those glass ceilings and put them in the positions that they are meant to be in and that they are qualified to be in. And that might even be your position. And you have to just recognize that and just let it be and put that person in that position. And that's where I'll stay.
Well, that sounds like a nice place to put a period to me. Robert, what would you say to the Des Moines business community about how they can be complementary in the equity and inclusion work?
Well, I mean, Sandra and Julian have obviously said a lot, and probably similar to what I was thinking, but I think just like they were saying, we have to recognize that the business community is essential in sort of affecting the social, economic, and political landscape of our society, and that they have always been integral to that process. And so we cannot separate the current sort of a social upheaval or social inequalities from the business community and the actions that they have taken, because all of them have lobbyists who go and lobby a lot of these policies and politicians and whatnot. So we cannot separate the business community from what's happening sort of in our society, in our communities. And so that's number one thing. And another thing of a lot of times, and what we've seen, especially when Black Lives Matter happened, is sort of a lot of these businesses are being put a lot of pressure to sort of put out messages and whatnot. A lot of them sent us a lot of platitudes about racial justice that literally meant nothing in terms of actually bringing about any sort of effective long-term change or impact. And what they were doing in essence, they were just basically applying Band-Aid to a lot of ones that they helped to inflict in the first place. And that is problematic, is that we don't want Band-Aids. What we want is, how are you gonna think about bringing a clinic or bringing hospitals in those communities and bringing surgeons who can actually help and sort of fix up those wounds? But also, how do you think about bringing, whether it's grocery stores, healthy grocery stores in those communities, to make sure that these communities, people who live in these communities, are getting the proper nutrition and sort of healthy foods, to make sure that they don't have some of these, physical wounds anymore and whatnot. And so what I'm trying to say is that putting out these platitudes about racial justice don't fix anything. They don't help anything. It's just applying a Band-Aid on a wound that you helped to inflict in the first place. And the second thing, and I think a lot of this has been talking about leadership within a lot of businesses. What does your executive team look like? Who are the faces and who is being represented on there? If it all looks like a whole bunch of Bobs are the ones sitting on there, you got a problem, and clearly you have not been doing the work to try to make sure that your business reflects, first of all, its audience, its customer base. It also reflects the society and the community that you live in. When you're talking about who sits on the board, who's making these decisions. And also another thing, when you're thinking about hiring a Black person for an executive position, please stop hiring us just for the diversity and inclusion position. That is not all that we bring to the table. That is what about, have you looked for any Black people who can be who can be the CEOs, chief information officers, chief operation officer, chief financial officer? We have those capabilities and those skills as well too. And so it's about doing that sort of proactive work, right? And another thing, and I would go on to talk about real estate, because we've seen there's a lot of discrimination when it comes to Black buyers and Black sellers. There was just a story, I believe it was either South or North Carolina, I might be getting the wrong state, where a mixed race couple, basically when they had the pictures, I believe they had pictures in their home that they were trying to sell. And basically, obviously there's a Black woman on there as well. And so they show that when they had those pictures up there, when people were coming to try to basically put up an offer for the house, that they ended up putting up a lower offer when those pictures resembled a Black person in there, a Black family. And then when they changed the pictures and put up a whole bunch of white faces, then the property value went up, and they started, and what was being offered was a much higher sort of offer and whatnot. And so it's about asking yourself those questions as well. So why does me being Black, what does it associate, or what is it synonymous with being of much lower value, even when we talk about property values, right, and real estate? And so it's about asking yourself those kind of questions, right? And how do you change that? And also when you're talking about a lot of these companies, or we talk about Principal, or a lot of these huge corporations that use a lot of different algorithms and models and whatnot, how do you make sure that the algorithms and models you're using are also not biased in nature, and they're not bringing about the same sort of biases that we see in society, right? We all know there's a lot of conversations about how artificial intelligence is very discriminatory. There's a lot of cases of racial discrimination within artificial intelligence. And so how are you even making sure that as a company, the sort of models and algorithms and technologies you're using are not further reinforcing the same biases and racial sort of stereotypes that we see in society? And so it's about doing that sort of proactive work. And the two things I just finished off, because I actually have to go get a COVID test afterwards. The two things I'll finish up with is a lot of these businesses have been giving money or whatever to a lot of different organizations. And the thing that I want them to think about is that before you give money to an organization, what sort of research are you doing ahead of time? Are you just putting money to NAACP because everybody knows NAACP, but then in return you go and lobby a politician to pass the same policies that NAACP is supposed to fight against? That doesn't make sense. That's counterintuitive. It doesn't make a lot of sense, right? And so it's about thinking about also your lobbying practices, and how do those lobbying practices and the sort of policies and politicians you're supporting end up affecting those communities that are facing discrimination and all these other different social upheavals and sort of things are happening. And so it's about it's almost like a 180 and 360 view about what equity and inclusion means in the practices that you have as a business. So don't just throw money at us, but it's about intentional investment. How are you helping Black businesses and Black entrepreneurs be able to have gain more capital, gain more skills, gain more knowledge about how to improve their customer base and how to increase profit? And I was just ending off with this. I understand that for businesses, profits, that is the number one thing, that is the number one objective and goal. But we also have to understand that profit also has to be a company with a social awareness, right? It has to be a company with some sort of social awareness, and us as you all as businesses being intentional about this work is important, because the face of America is changing. And if you're not tapping into this new demographic that's going to be buying, that's going to be going to Hy-Vee, going to doing whatever it's insurance policies with Principal, whoever it may be, then there is going to be a whole customer base that you're going to be sort of
missing out on.
Right. And so profit, in the long term, profit may be terrible for you if you don't do what's right when it comes to equity and racial justice.
And I have to do what's right when it comes to this panel, which is closing this conversation. Y'all are thebomb.com. Okay. You are very brilliant, and I appreciate your thought capital and what you're doing for this community, as well as our world and our country. Someone is going to drop in the chat the different breakout groups that are going to follow after this. I want to applaud you, Sandra and Julian and Robert, for taking your time and talking with us today, and just shedding a little light. And I am still on time because it's 2:25. Y'all see me? Y'all see me? We're on time. Thank you, everybody.